I'm just doing that so I don't forget. So Beth, I take it, do you live on a lake?
I do not live right on the lake, but I'm very close. My mother and my brother live right on the lake, and I'm in back of them. So
Oh, okay. So you're very close.
I am. I can't see the lake though, and it's maddening. You know, that I'll look up and go, oh, I missed another sunset. But that's a luxury problem. I'm happy to be this close.
Lauren, we are one shy of a quorum.
Good, because I am still eating.
And actually, oh, Abe is here. We have a quorum now.
Yeah, Dean, I don't know if you know, but I'm filling in for Kent.
I do know.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
And I'm an alternate, so I'm not a voting member, so I don't count me in that quorum.
Correct. Yep. I have a little running tab here, but yeah, so we have Lauren, Abe, Lindsay, and Beth as reps who are counting. Tom is an alternate who counts. Sarah, did I see? Oh, maybe Abe. Okay, so I see what happened. I think when Abe first logged in, maybe it had Sarah's name.
I did. Yeah, I had to change that.
Okay. She was here. I saw the name and then didn't. All right. Okay. Like magic. And Barry. So yes.
And I'm here too. This is Alaire. I'm going to turn off my video for a little bit and eat lunch, and then I will
Okay.
be back on.
Okay.
I'm also finishing lunch, so I'm going to turn off my video for a couple of minutes.
I'm just making you guys watch me eat the sandwich. All right. So, hi everybody, and welcome to the September 7th, 2022 meeting of the Missisquoi Basin Water Quality Council. Wow, it's gotten harder to say apparently. Let's do a round of introductions. I know many of us know each other and that we kind of just did it, but let's do it anyway. Let me pull this up again. If you can say your name, organization, if you're voting or an alternate today, and pronouns if you would like. So I'm Lauren Weston. I'm with the Franklin County Natural Resources Conservation District, and I'm voting, and she, her pronouns. And I'm going to pass it to Pete.
Pete Benevento. I represent the Lake Carmine Campus Association, the Franklin Watershed Committee, and I am here just as a visitor, a guest.
Thanks, Pete. Beth.
Hi all, I'm Beth Torpy. I'm the water quality manager for NVDA, and I'm a voting member, and I'm a she, her.
Beth, or if I'm just gonna put voting next to people's names just so I can remember, if that's all right with you, and then we can change it back at the end.
If you want us to put voting next to our names, we can do that. Oh, you did it already. Look at you. Very good.
Thanks. Lindsay.
Lindsay White, Missisquoi River Basin Association, voting member, she, her.
So, Ellen.
I'm Ellen Fox with the Missisquoi River Basin Association, and I am an alternate.
Abe.
Abraham Ames. I work for the Orleans County Conservation District. I am a voting member today. He, him.
Awesome. Tom.
Tom Rizzleton, Friends of Northern Lake Champlain, filling in for, I'm an alternate, but filling in for Kent Henderson, and I am voting today.
Awesome. Jake.
Jake Kucher from Westfield, representing municipalities, I guess, and alternate.
Barry.
Barry Lamke, Northwest Regional Planning Commission, voting he, him.
Alaire.
I'm Alaire Diamond from Vermont Land Trust, and I am a voting member, and I use she, her pronouns.
Yeah.
Dea, I use she, her pronouns, and I am staff for the CWIP.
And Dean. We always love hearing you. Want to introduce yourself? Oh, are you frozen? No, you're moving. Dean, are you there?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said Ian, and I was looking for an
Oh.
Ian in the list. Sorry, Dean Pierce, Northwest RPC, non-voting staff, he, him.
Awesome. All right. Dean, if you wouldn't mind tossing up the protocol again, I will stop having this at some point, but just as a reminder, have your Zoom names up to with your name, organization, voting or alternate, and pronouns if you would like. We expect that you'll act responsibly during the meeting and stay focused and keep your camera on as possible. Please raise your hand and we'll form a queue. If you don't know how to do that in Zoom, please let us know. You can also physically raise your hand when we go to vote. Please physically raise your hand. And I will see you. And any comments in the chat will be read aloud by the CWIP staff for the public record. Awesome. Over to you, Dean.
Thank you, Lauren. Happy September, everybody. You should be seeing on your screen the agenda for today. And since we've done welcome and introduction and reviewed the Zoom meeting protocol, now would be a good time for you to review and adjust the agenda. Oh, and if there are no adjustments, or even if there are, approve it.
Any adjustments? Seeing none, I think we can move forward with the agenda. Do you need us to vote on the agenda approval?
It's customary for a vote to be taken to approve.
Thank you. One of these days I'll get the hang of this thing. Do I hear? Thank you. That was Lindsay White. Thank you. Do I hear a second? I see Barry's thumb is up. Okay. Any opposed? All in favor, raise your hand. Alaire, Abe, Lindsay. Sorry. Tom, Barry, Lauren. Awesome. The motion passes. Somehow I've gotten worse at this. I apologize, everyone. The video's showing up wonky on my screen right now. I'll work on fixing that for the next vote. All right, approval of minutes. Does anyone have any edits to the minutes that they saw in the meeting packet? Making sure everybody's there who was there. All right. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as written?
This is Lindsay. I will motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting as written.
Wonderful. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Abe. Any abstentions? If you were not at that meeting, please let us know by raising your hand. Alaire is abstaining. Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. I see Tom, Beth, Lindsay, Abraham, Barry, and Lauren. Any opposed? Please raise your hand now. Seeing none, the motion passes. Also, it appears that Sarah is joining us. I might give her a second here. Hey, Sarah, can you hear us?
Yes.
Beautiful. Thanks for hopping in. The next item on our agenda is public comment not related to items on the agenda. Does anyone have a public comment? Seeing none, we can continue forward. Dean, here you go.
Okay. Yeah, you have my mic on. Sorry about that. Yes, as part of this part of the meeting, this is an opportunity to talk about the bylaws and some organizational things that we've touched on a little bit before. I don't want to jinx us, but I do think this meeting could perhaps go a little shorter than some of the previous ones because we have touched on some of these things before. I have broken out some of these topics with us first talking about some possible updates, at least one possible update to the bylaw language, and then having after that a discussion about alternates and the way or who alternates are the alternates for. And I'm also seeing Tom's hand raised, so I don't know, Lauren, if you want to recognize him or if he has a question about this or something else. But after that, we could talk about the plan to seat some new alternates, not today, but at the upcoming meeting. Then we could talk a little bit about frequency format or confirm frequency, format, location of meetings. That's the overview, and I can move on to the next slide having to do with the possible updating of at least one instance of the language if you didn't want to hear from Tom first.
Let's hear
Tina,
from Tom.
It was that was I don't get to raise my hand in these meetings, so today I do, and I didn't know how to work the buttons, so I just had to figure that out.
Fair enough.
So
It
we're good.
happens to all of us. Awesome. Thanks, Tom. All right, Dean.
Yeah, so we have been working on the bylaws since the beginning, in place, recognizing that they would be a document that gets revisited as time goes by. One of the specific sections of the bylaws that was identified as being revisited is the section having to do with conflict of interest, because we know that the EC has conflict of interest as one of the items in their guidance materials that have not yet been released. But there are other facets of the bylaws that are, I guess I'll call them language related, and that's really the focus of the discussion today. There is the question, how or when should the council address language such as when pursuing a mutually, in the section having to do with the decision-making process, the language currently reads, when pursuing a mutually acceptable solution, members will, insofar as possible, hold each other accountable, ensure minority opinions are heard and considered, and demonstrate equity in the decision-making process. And as I understand, Lauren, the word minority was one that was flagged as perhaps being a candidate for some other word or substitution. And it may just be that this section is an example of building into the bylaws more equitable or open language. I think at this point, I'll just turn it back over to you because that was all I had prepared.
Yeah, so my understanding is that we can't actually change the language today, but that we wanted to have a draft from today to make available to vote next time to change the word minority, with the concern that minority might indicate something that we aren't necessarily intending. I think the intention of the statement is to ensure that we're not just a sounding board to each other, or an echo chamber is what I meant to say. Sounding board would actually be great. An echo chamber for each other. So minority in the sense of not majority, but not minority in the sense of like a marginalized group or underrepresented group. So I think we are trying to find a better word for minority if anyone has a thesaurus handy. Yes, Ellen.
My thought was dissenting or something like that, just something that is different than the sort of primary or prevalent opinion that's being carried. Usually, if there's a quasi-judicial or judicial proceeding, there's the decision, but then there are dissenting opinions. And so those are always heard in that kind of due process. So it seems similar in nature to that to me.
I am also seeing in the chat alternative opinions or all opinions. I see somebody clapping. I'm not sure for which one. Barry, which one do you like?
I tend to cast a wide net, so I would have two changes. One is ensure all opinions are heard and considered, and demonstrate equity and inclusion in the decision-making process. So that kind of keeps it open instead of one opinion versus the other.
I like those changes. Do we have any other changes, or do we want to consider alternative or dissenting further?
I'll just say another, with the word all, I think with this group, we won't necessarily have a majority, and we don't necessarily know what that is. I mean, we're a diverse group of people representing a variety of people, of individuals and organizations and places. So I just like all, because it's just like, we're just gonna see what all the opinions are among the group.
Awesome. Thanks, Alaire. I also like the change of adding inclusive. Barry, thanks for that language as well. All right. Any further discussion on this point? We're not going to vote at this time, but we will give a different phrasing here for next time to vote on, unless there are more comments for this particular section. All right.
So just so that I'm tracking things and Dea is tracking things for the minutes, it sounds like there is some support growing for ensure all opinions are heard, and is that correct at least initially?
Yes.
And then what was the second part of Barry's suggestion?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Barry, but I believe it was and demonstrate equity and inclusion in the decision-making process. Don't you hate that about about Adobe? It's so hard to move it once you already type it.
Yes, I do. And yes, just to reiterate, the bylaws themselves have a section on changing the bylaws, and the bylaws say that a proposal to change has to be shared or aware to, the members have to be aware of it a month in advance. And so by settling on the language today, this would become the proposal. So it could be something that a motion would be appropriate if someone wanted to make it. Moving that the proposed change to the bylaws that would be voted on next time would consist of striking the word minority and replacing it with the word all, and inserting and inclusion in that last part, as was just mentioned.
So do we need to make a motion at this point so that that's our proposal?
Well, as long as everybody understands that this is the proposal, it is not necessary. I mean, the staff, we will take it as the consensus, and that's what's proposed.
Okay.
It's not necessary, but I just thought if someone wanted to tie it up in a bow, that wouldn't be a problem.
Can I hear a motion to tie it up in a bow as per what Dean has just mentioned and is written on the screen? I see Sarah has her hand raised to make that motion. Sarah Downs, and Barry is seconding. Anyone abstaining? No. All in favor, please raise your hand. I see Beth. I see Tom. I see Abraham. I see Lauren. I see Barry and Alaire and Sarah and Lindsay. Wonderful. Thank you all. Motion passes that this is our proposal.
So yeah, so just to be clear, we're moving, the council has moved to bring this proposal to a vote at the next meeting. Is that how I should note it?
I think so. Dean, do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
If anyone has like a good video of someone being a chair and running these votes on Zoom, I would love to see it. Any tips or tricks would be great.
You're doing okay.
Thank you. All right. I think that was our only known language discussion point at this time. Thanks, Alaire. Well, Alaire in the chat said you're doing great, Lauren. I have to read it out loud, so thank you.
So we ready to move on?
Yes.
One of the other bylaw or organizational related topics is having to do with alternates. The current language in the bylaws is drawn from the language and rule. It says WIP member appointing entities may designate one or more alternate statutory members who may act in place of or replace an appointed member in the event of absence or disqualification of that appointed member. So basically, if someone can't make a meeting, their alternate can vote in their place. Or if someone can make a meeting, but they have a conflict and they have to recuse themselves under the terms of the conflict section, then the voting passes on. So what that means, and I hope this chart isn't grotesque in its complication, but basically we have a list of reps, and they have organizations, and we have alternates who are appointed by those organizations, by those groups of organizations. So the idea is, at least I think the original idea was that there's some consistency in perspective, let's say. So that's the default. That's the current situation. What I think people are wondering about is whether or not that arrangement will suffer from a weakness due to the fact that if an alternate is closely aligned through the organization or a sibling organization, if we want to think of it that way, if the member has a conflict, then the alternate might have a conflict as well. So what do we do about that? So there has been some thought to considering at least a different arrangement. So on the left, we have a rep who, let's say, is from a conservation district, and their alternate is also from a conservation district. If both of the conservation districts have an association with the project, then they're both going to have to recuse themselves, and it lets in a lurch. And so the idea is, if we think of it, and this is just an example to illustrate the concept, if we think of all of the alternates shifting one line so that the municipal rep becomes the alternate for the conservation district, and the non-conservation district becomes the rep or the alt for the regional planning commission, and so on, then we wouldn't have that problem. So this is my attempt to describe what I think people feel could be an issue down the road. Since we haven't had these kinds of votes, obviously it hasn't been the case, but it's something that I think people wanted to have some discussion about, and so that's all I've done to tee this up. And I guess I will stop talking and let the group discuss from here on. And Lauren, please help me if this isn't what you were thinking this issue was about.
This is exactly what I was thinking. Thank you for attempting to make it visual. I think the one thing that we might run into that we may in the future have a solution is this idea of funding for alternates. And at this time, there is no funding for alternates. And so that makes it a little bit trickier to try to switch things up, but it also just might really help actually making projects happen. So Beth, I see your hand is up.
That's really interesting. So my first question is it allowed?
I'll take a stab at responding. I think it's possible, but it would take the consent of the sponsoring organizations, or the organizations that are able to appoint the alternate in the first place. They would all have to agree to do this. So unless the rule was changed, and that would be a very involved process, it would have to be something that the conservation districts, the regional planning commissions, the watershed organizations, the land conservation organizations, everybody would have to agree and they would have to come together in a room and say, we're going to do this in order to solve this problem. So I think it's possible, but it would be difficult.
Yeah, I guess what, quick first thought is that the reason for the alternate, I believe, is that you're supposed to represent similar stakeholders. So if I had NRCD being the alternate for the municipalities, their goals are not necessarily always aligned. Not that they're not, I'm just saying that there's a difference between the stakeholder representation there. But maybe you can line things up so that you can have a, like the Northwest could be the backup for the Northeast. And maybe, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
We hear ya. Thanks, Beth. Barry.
It sounds like a kind of a really strange game of musical chairs, but is this specifically as it relates to project decision making, or is this okay? If it is strictly related to project decision making, and there is a conflict, in a typical situation, the person with a conflict states they have a conflict and they step back and they don't vote. What we're suggesting here is that somebody else steps in and has a vote. So why don't we consider just the person with the conflict revealing the conflict and just stepping back and letting the vote happen without them? Why do we need that extra vote?
My thinking, and this might be unfounded, is that there may be a project that 4 partners are bringing forward together. And so 4 people have to recuse themselves, and we wouldn't have enough people to vote, which may never happen. But that was the theory as to why we would need something like this, or if 3 people couldn't attend a meeting and 1 person had to recuse themselves. I guess they would need their internal alternate to step in.
To Beth's question, is there precedent for this? I mean, is this an example that is being used elsewhere that we can say that works really great, or here it works great, but here's some challenges? Is it out there at all? Or did this just come out of Dean's brain?
It unfortunately came out of my brain, so
okay.
apologies.
No worries.
Tom.
It feels like this should be taken care of just in our language, where let's just say somebody recuses themselves. Do we still have a quorum to vote? Everything proceeds as is. Again, to your point, Lauren, if all of a sudden there isn't a quorum to vote, I might propose this. There's a group of alternates in the room, and maybe it's more of a random selection. Just so that we don't have these weird alignments and all that kind of stuff. But that would be my thoughts.
Noted. Thank you, Tom. Jake.
Yeah, I kind of agree with the last 2 comments in a way. I mean, if the project has merit, I assume that it would would be recognized by those who are still able to vote, even if somebody recuses themselves. I know you put out an example that maybe if too many were recusing themselves, it could be a problem. I think that can be overcome. I think simplicity is a good thing. And in many organizations, people recuse themselves for whatever reason, quite often, and life goes on. So again, if the project is seen as meriting approval, I think the rest of the voting members could carry it. I don't know if I said that well, but that's kind of where I stand as my opinion as a non-voting person at the moment.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Jake. Beth.
I was also wondering about the definition of conflict of interest. So in my case, I have 4 jobs, And so it's possible that, and particularly I'm the chair of the Memphremagog Basin Water Quality Council. And so there could be times when my other jobs would have not an impact, but an overlap with that position. But my role as a water quality planner and the decisions being made from that position should not impact a decision I'm making about a project just because from another job. For example, one of the projects that's going to be submitted at the beginning for the Memphremagog Basin is a project in my town, and I'm the zoning administrator and I run the invasive species prevention program. But it's still a good project and it would improve the water quality. So from my position as the water quality planner, which is my seat in the council, that would not be a conflict of interest. So I'm guessing, my question is, do we need a better definition of conflict of interest? And then that way, if we had that, then maybe we won't have people having to recuse themselves. Does that make any sense?
It does. Thank you, Beth. I just want to note for the record that Karen Bates has joined us also, our watershed planner. Hi, Karen. Dean, yeah, Dean, we're on the same wavelength here. So the conflict of interest definition is on the screen right now. And as it stands, this is direct from rule, I believe. It is broad as to what a conflict of interest may be. And this may be one of those things that at this point we keep our alternates as is, and if we start running into 4 or 5 people having to recuse themselves from a vote, we need to make a change. This might be too proactive for a situation that may never happen. Just wanted to, I know that there has just been concern. I know some of us were concerned about serving on multiple boards or donating to other organizations or being related to somebody in Franklin County isn't the craziest idea. Type of thing. Beth, is your hand back up or still up?
Actually, it's still up, but I had another question. But what does that say in English?
Dean. Oh, you're muted, Dean.
Sorry.
Okay.
The way I would describe it is that it sets the bar, the rule sets the bar very high. And by that I mean it is a very broad and inclusive, expansive definition of conflict of interest. And I'll editorialize for a second by going further and saying it's an unnecessarily expansive definition for policymakers as opposed to judges. And you are policymakers, you are not judges. And so I think that there was a little bit of confusion on the part of whoever was, attacking this part of the rule and getting it written. So they tried to have the best of both worlds by saying, oh, we have this really high bar that people will have to observe when it comes to conflict of interest, but we'll also set the bar really low when it comes to the knowledge they have, because we will let them sit in the room. And I have dealt with conflict of interest issues enough to know that ordinarily when you say someone has a conflict of interest, the best practice is that person gets out of the room and has no part of the decision. And yet we have rules that say they are effectively part of the decision making because they can answer questions and they can tell you about the project. It literally makes no sense. So short of it is, it's a very expansive definition. It does mean that, direct or indirect, almost anything can be an indirect interest, and financial or otherwise. So it's not just money. In some organizations, conflict of interest is really focused on monetary issues, but this definition goes out of its way to not be limited to those things, and therefore it's expansive. So it's one where someone who's really conscientious about a proposed project, they could end up saying, hey, what happened, I'm included, or I'm encompassed in this decision of conflict of interest, and so I have to step aside. So it could happen that people recuse themselves somewhat frequently. And and with that in mind, I think that what Lauren has thought of as a way to deal with that it's not crazy because it's the kind of thing we would need if people are regularly recusing themselves, if we take this definition at face value.
Barry, and then Sarah, I see you. I will call you next.
Picking up on Dean's comment about this being very expansive, I would recommend that we take no action today on alternates as it relates to this conflict of interest, because we don't know enough. Two things. One is we don't know enough about our process to know what a decision is. We're going to be participating in some prioritization and some ranking. And just by virtue of all of us participating in assigning rank and priorities and and scoring projects, we're going to be involved in decisions that affect all of our organizations. And the makeup of, and the second thing is that the makeup of this body is kind of by definition a group of organizations who may be in the position where they're doing a project. So I think it's just too early. I don't think we don't know enough about, because if we hold this, if we say that somebody recuses himself because they're making a decision involving their project, that means that person, let's say a project is coming forward at the very beginning when it comes in the door and requests funding, do they immediately step back and they don't participate in the ranking of any projects for that round? So it's just, I think it's too early to make any decisions because we don't know enough about what the decisions are going to be and what they're going to look like.
Sarah.
And I'm troubled by the word with conflict of interest. Otherwise, I feel like everyone that's on this council has a vested interest. You know, we all care. I mean, many of you are much more expertise than I am, but all of us care about the water quality. So we all have a vested interest in it. And so at what level is that? I think there has to be, I mean, I have never sat on something like this, but I think there has to be some level of trust of people disclosing, you know, like when Beth's talking about everything she does, I wonder if she sleeps, but, you know, anything that's over in the East, she's going to have a conflict of interest with, because she cares. So I struggle with that wording in terms of a conflict of interest. And for many of you that are over closer to Lake Champlain, you're going to have a conflict of interest in there.
Beth.
I agree with Barry. I like the idea of tabling it for now, but in the meantime, as the Basin Water Quality Council, do we have access to legal advice? Because this is a legal question, and I'm sure the rule isn't going to be changed, so we're kind of stuck with this language, correct?
Dean, I would think so, but you have at least on the language part, I have no idea about the legal counsel answer.
Yeah, there is some recognition that legal advice will be needed as part of this process, although it's a little weird in that the examples that are discussed have to do with things like getting site access. The examples I've heard or seen don't have anything to do with stuff like this, interpreting the rule or the bylaws or offering opinions like that. But I imagine that if there was a time when the council was faced with some tricky and it was ultimately a legal question, then the CWIP would try to get the legal advice that you need. I mean, my personal belief is that boards that need legal advice should have access to it and shouldn't be frustrated in their desire to get it. So, I mean, I would try. It's just that I can't say, oh, this is the attorney we have selected, because we haven't selected a WIC attorney yet, but we would try to get that advice.
Tom,
I think I'm pretty much in line with Barry, and I don't want to oversimplify this, but I think we're going to know it when we see it. And I think in our bylaws, we have language to address that. You know, as a group, if we see something that doesn't look right, or that we have a mechanism to address that. I think possibly the bigger challenge might be, because I've been in these situations, it's hard sometimes internally to know if you're in conflict. And the challenge might be for one of the members to have to call somebody out in a nice way. But you know what I mean? Like, sometimes it's very difficult internally to know you're in conflict, and we might need a mechanism to say, hey, Tom, do you know you might be in conflict on this, and then we need to be able to sit down and discuss it, possibly legally, as was just mentioned.
thank you, Tom. So I just want to say thanks everyone for the conversation and your thoughts. I think this is something we're gonna eventually figure out. Maybe having these pre-conversations is helpful. It sounds like what I'm hearing from people who are interested in speaking is that keeping it as is for now, keeping our alternates as is for now, maybe getting some clarification on that conflict of interest statement and what that does or does not include from a legal perspective, or even just like, I don't know, asking somebody else. I don't know who you'd ask, might be helpful. And keeping our alternates as is for the time being. Is that what I am hearing? No one's saying that's not what I'm hearing, so I'm going to say that that's what I'm hearing. Dean, does that work?
Yeah, we can. So I'm hearing the same things that you're hearing, I think, and we can look for avenues to get opinions. I would say that we're told that the guidance document is coming, and since we've been told that it will further address conflict of interest, I'm hoping that some of these questions would be answered, because I think I would be very surprised if DEC didn't consult their attorney when it came to that section. And I know that there's one attorney who's been helping some of these committees do their work, and I don't know that people like me have direct access, but I think that I could talk to someone at DEC who could possibly get that person to answer a specific question, maybe, for us. But if the answer to that is no, we may still have other avenues to get some legal advice if we still don't hear anything from DEC that satisfies us.
And then Dean, I'm wondering if you can show the member alternate list for this basin. So moving on from that whole entire point of that section, I wonder if we can see that list, because I believe I don't have an alternate. So I was going to nominate one of my staff today, and then we could vote on it next time.
Okay.
Not that you guys would ever have a meeting without me, obviously, but in the off chance COVID variant 12 catches me. Sorry, Dean. I know I did not tell you that I was going to need this. Thanks. So I'm not the only one without an alternate. So just tossing it out there for folks. If you don't have an alternate, I guess at this point, what we're saying is try to get someone from either your organization or another organization in your category. Is that accurate, Dean?
Yes, yeah, and I'll also mention there is one name that's here, and today is Emily Sherrington's last day working for the town of St. Albans. So we're going to be, and I've already been thinking about avenues, but we're going to be down one from this list as of tomorrow.
Okay. So I don't know if I need to like nominate an alternate or we vote on it next time when she's here, but my staff member, Catherine Donarski, is who I am nominating as alternate, and she already knows she has to come to the next meeting for the Natural Resources Conservation District, Franklin County Conservation District.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go Beth and then Blair.
So there isn't anyone else in my organization that could make every single meeting as an alternate. If I couldn't make it, somebody else could probably make it. But we're really it's slim pickings for that type of involvement. So the question is, does the alternate have to attend every single meeting, or is it all right if they attend if you're not able to attend?
The way I've been handling it, because I'm an alternate for the North Lake Direct board, is that I'm only attending when specifically asked. I don't know if that's a general agreement, but that's what I'm doing. I just realized I also didn't get to a layer.
Well, no, that's helpful. That's kind of the situation we have at the land trust. So Tucker Malone has agreed to be our alternate for this group. But he is a voting member of another council. So he definitely he doesn't have the capacity to come to every meeting, but it would be more like I would make the arrangement with him if I can't attend in the future. So if that's okay, then that's who our alternate would be. Or I can find, somebody else, but he's the best one probably from VLT to be in this position.
Thanks, Alaire. Dean, do you have further clarification on that? I know we've talked on the side about this.
Well, the thing I would say is that when the councils were first getting started, it was seen as beneficial for alternates to be as plugged in as they could be, because they would be learning so that they wouldn't just be dropped into a situation without any background at all. It just seems like, okay, it's a good idea for an alternate to have some understanding of what the group does. But as time has gone by and the councils have gotten their feet under them, I think it's less of an issue. And I think in particular, when an alternate is a rep in another capacity, then they're up to speed on things. So there's really no reason for someone who's a rep in one basin to attend all of the meetings of another basin when they're just the alternate in that basin, because they have an idea of what's going on. I think that this maybe the importance of having people at every meeting has dropped off. But I would also say that if there was an alternate who wanted to participate in every meeting, we would try to find a way to support them, because someday they may become the rep. Maybe it's important to build understanding and capacity, and we would try to support them if they were able to attend every meeting. But I don't think attending every meeting is something that we need an alternate to do.
And I'll say too, I know some of us have tactical basin planning funds to be attending this work, and they are currently not funding alternates to attend meetings. So I think that speaks volumes also. So Lindsay,
I just wanted to give it because I think the council's noticed that both Ellen and I are here at all the meetings, and that's an organizational choice. We've just brought Ellen on full time, so she's going to be taking a lot more of the lift from the chaos that I've been trying to juggle. And so I found it very important to be here. My understanding of the alternates is the same, that it's great if they can be there, but also really their job is to stand in when I can't be here. So I didn't want anyone to look and be like, well, Ellen comes all the time. That's a organizational choice that we made, looking at like, well, we can't fund you through the source that we're funding my time here, but at least for now, it's important.
Right, and maybe since we're keeping, in theory, the alternates as almost like substitutes for the main rep, now within the organization, it's kind of on the rep to make sure that the alternate knows what's going on as it stands currently. And that might be harder if we did the whole swap thing, but we can cross that bridge if we start drowning. Dean, so what I heard is that Alair's alternate would be Tucker. I think I heard that Beth doesn't necessarily have an alternate to call on, but maybe somebody from her staff would also be able to join in. And then my alternate would be Katie Donarski. I think those were the big gaps. And besides Emily, is that?
I don't have an alternate.
Okay.
We're a little NRPC heavy here right now.
So sorry, I think that we have to keep in mind that the rule says that the sponsoring organizations, there is, I know that there are some difference of opinion, but what I have understood is that it would be the conservation districts as a group, however they want to define themselves, that would say Katie Donarski is the alternate. That's the first thing. And that land conservation organizations as a group would somehow be the ones to say that Tucker's going to be the alternate. I'm just going to put that on the table, that that's been the understanding that the Northwest RPC has had of the rules requirements. So the idea of an organization saying who the alternate is it may be that that's where we will be at the end, but it hasn't been. Secondly, I wanted to just say that there's no restriction on the number of alternates as far as I understand. So maybe one way to deal with this in the NVDA situation is that if we know the entire pool of possible people who might substitute for Beth, she can't say who it will be specifically, but she thinks it'll be one of 3 people, then let's make all 3 people alternates so that whichever one can make that meeting that she can't, that we're covered. Because that's just, I think, an easy fix for the problem if we're not sure who that person would be, but it's someone from the organization. So let's make all of those, however many people, alternates.
I like that approach. So what I'm hearing is we all need to go back to our category groups, get a email written to probably Dean and myself that says, we all agree as our group that this person will be the alternate, or this list of people will be the alternates. And then the BWIC can approve that as those come in at following meetings. See Dean nodding his head, which is always a great sign. Wonderful. Any further questions on this particularity? And I trust that Barry and Dean can figure out what to do with the NRPC alternate. Okay. All right. I do also want to note that Claire Madden is here from the Vermont DEC, just for the minutes. And then I still see no other hands. Okay. Moving on. How many tabs can I have open? There we go. Dean, you are muted.
If I may, I was just going to say that as it relates to meetings, yeah, unless there's some feeling on the part of members, there's a need to change, which could be the case, which is why I think it's worth throwing out there. The council's going to be meeting every other month. Some councils are meeting quarterly, but we had been anticipating every other month. We will be doing hybrid meetings. I don't want to say always, but whenever possible, which I'm hoping is always, and that the physical location will be something that is central within the basin. So we're unlikely to have a meeting in an extreme edge of the basin, generally speaking, because that would make things even more challenging for people who might have a long distance to drive. Is that correct? Do I have that correct? And if so, is that what we want to go with?
I think we had discussed at the last meeting wanting to hold like our annual meeting, or at least one meeting a year, as in person as possible. I don't know if that needs to be on this list here. And then I think the other component that we might not be part of this at this point in time is making sure that we do have a physical location that the public could go to if they wanted to be part of this meeting, whether that's the NRPC office or it's a central location, or we figure out another location for at least like one of us with a computer to be in for each meeting. That is my 2 cents. Other folks' 2 cents. Okay. Seeing none. I guess my one question would be for this year, if we get guidance and we get money all of a sudden, and we realize we really should meet more than once every other month, can we adjust as needed? If it's like we get the money in December and we're trying to get some projects in for construction season.
My reaction is if the members are willing to meet monthly, then yes, we would organize things monthly. It may be that those become more likely to be remote or less likely to be hybrid, however you want to look at it. But I understand. I understand the concern. It's just with so much uncertainty about finalizing the contracts and the steps that will need to be followed. I wasn't ready to come out and say, folks, we should meet monthly for the time being, because I don't want people to have meetings where they don't feel like there was enough to discuss. But in response to time demands, then yeah, we should be ready and we will support you.
And I guess I wonder, I think we currently have monthly meetings on our calendars. Is that true? No? Okay, I have too many meetings then, and I'm getting them confused.
Yeah, I believe it was settled that the September meeting would be the first in the every other month schedule, which would mean that we're not going to meet in October.
Okay.
The next meeting would be the November meeting. I know that the Lamoille Council has the problem with a conflict with Thanksgiving, but that's not this group's problem.
As I almost wonder if it makes sense to like hold on our calendars a monthly meeting and we could just like cancel it. I don't know how open meeting law would like that or not. If there's nothing to discuss. I'm anticipating us getting the contracts and being like, darn, we're not gonna be able to get anything on the ground based on our meeting dates. Is my fear. Also, I see Beth's hand. I apologize, Beth. Go ahead.
No worries, Lauren. You mentioned something about getting more funding after the first of the year. so my funding's through the Tactile Basin Plan, and that's, you know, end of June type thing. Do you anticipate additional funding on top of that? I mean, I'm sure I could fit in another, you know, 2 hours a month.
I see.
Yeah.
I
I'm
see.
just wondering about the funding, and I'm not complaining. I'll be able to make it no matter what you do. But I'm just wondering if there, you know, if it's going to be the first of the year, if it's going to be the fiscal year.
Noted. I might have misspoken. I was talking about the QUIS money for projects, so not for our time in the WIC meetings. My understanding is what you have for your tactical basin planning money for this year is what you have through the end of June of next year. And so, yeah, adding meetings would be an unfunded activity. Good point.
Watch out saying that unfunded mandate word.
So maybe we just keep that every other month, and if we need an ad hoc meeting, we can do a doodle. I see Dean nodding. Okay.
Yeah,
I see a thumbs up from Lindsay and Barry.
People might want to just put on their calendar a shadow or a placeholder just to, you know, protect that time in a low-key way, should that ever happen.
Yeah.
Can you send out invitations that way?
Say like low key, not a real meeting.
I guess
Just don't schedule something else.
I guess I can do that, yes.
Like a maybe for the in-between months.
There you go. And just don't show up unless they tell us you to. Yeah, so Tom says, I'm going to keep this spot once a month. Once money hits, we should get busy. Karen says, respond with tentative. That's a good point. And select your response on an Outlook invite and a Google invite, I assume. All right. Thanks, everybody. I think the next thing is something different. That would make logical sense. Status of the DEC initiatives affecting WIC work.
And I can go very, very quickly through a few of these and set things up for the presenters who are here to talk. I think, I'm not sure if Claire is here alone or if Helen has also joined her. I haven't looked at the members or attendees list, but I'll take care of the first couple so that they can get on the stage. As far as this overall agenda item, 3 parts: formula fund contract, which we touched on last time, the guidance document, and updated policy, CWIP policy, and tools, and that's where Claire will come in. Just revisiting formula grant agreements at the time of the last meeting, we hadn't seen them. First, before getting into the status, what do they do? Well, they're going to govern the flow of funds and the complexity of obtaining funds. They tell us the things like the performance measures we have to meet and the deliverables. So there's important stuff in there. I'll just share that we have them in draft form. The language that we've been presented with as relies or incorporates documents that haven't been written or finalized or released yet. We have them, but it seems like they're likely to go one more round, knock on wood. But there has been a lot of discussion about what they require and what does the language mean. So after the months and months and months of waiting for them, and I hope I don't sound too critical, it's going to take a little bit of time to resolve because they are important and expansive documents. So as far as when they might be signed, I would say mid-September, broadly defined at the earliest, but maybe more realistically October. And that's all I will say about formula grants, unless there are questions. And if there are none, just talking about the guidance document, so-called, there's a web page on the DEC website that talks about the guidance. So I've stolen some of the text from that. It says that the Water Investment Division, which is part of DEC, their staff with input from the CWISP and the larger stakeholder network are developing the guidance document. Sorry for the typo there. This has been in the works for a very long time. Some of the chapters are out in draft form. Chapter 6 is a very important chapter that addresses projects and project advancement. We have not seen yet, and we've been waiting for it because of the clarity that will provide to us and to the partners eventually regarding, what are the steps we will have to go through? What are those? So we're still waiting, but we're told it's soon, and my fingers are crossed that it will be soon. You see here, Chapter 5, conflicts of interest. That's one that is also forthcoming. And hopefully, the sum total of what I'll say is hopefully these chapters will answer the questions that we have, and the answers will seem reasonable.
Dean,
Yep,
can you put that link in the chat?
yes.
Thank you.
And speaking of chat, I just want to say that Tom has stepped out for 10 minutes and Karen's shared that chapter 6 is out of the secretary's office.
Okay. Yes, I had heard something about it. Oh, did she say out of the secretary's office or at the secretary's office?
Out.
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 Okay, so that would mean that it's been okayed and will happen very, very quickly, because what I had understood is that Chapter 6 was with the secretary, and that was the holdup. So that's good news. If it's out of the secretary and back to the staff, and presumably he's just getting whatever final edits need to be made to respond to the secretary, unless the secretary had a lot of concerns. So the question about put in the chat, I will do that. I just wanted to keep going through. There are other things that are covered elsewhere. There are cost factors, standard operating procedures for various things that have been produced. So some of these things are actually out, and we can read them and see what they tell us to do. So that's helpful. But there are references to documents like the CWIP policy. I can send these links in as well. The CWIP policy is a really important document that partners would probably be aware of, but maybe not everyone else is. They describe it, DEC describes it, or it describes itself as a communication tool to those who propose projects and who want and get grant funds. Tells you basically the funds available, the roles and responsibilities related to different funding programs, and the criteria to use the funds. The current policy for 2021. So we are told that the policy for 2022 will be available sometime in November. So the 2021 was done. It was in January of 21, I think. So very beginning of the year. The 2022 document is clearly being prepared, or will be available later in the year. This updated CWIP policy is the ultimate source for determining what will be eligible using CWISP funding. So it's going to be really important. I just want to communicate that point. That's really the only point. Our proposed contract, these formula fund contracts, have language such as what's shown here. The grantee, that's the CWISP, will use the appropriate performance measures as identified in the policy. And so those things will pass down. So we'll have to use the performance measures that are in this document. And if those change from what we have currently, then we will have to incorporate those changes. The CWISP will have to ensure that subgrantees complete and submit all standard milestones and deliverables as listed in the CWIP policy. So it's going to affect the partners. It also spells out the distinction between program delivery costs and project completion costs, at least the current one does. So long story short, it's an important document. The contract references it. We don't have it. It just was one of those reasons why it's taking a little bit of time to come to terms with signing these contracts, because when contracts refer to things that don't exist yet, it can give pause. That was it. That was all I was going to say before turning things over to the folks at DEC who've been working on tools. So unless there are questions about the things I've been blathering on about, I will stop and things over. Back to you, Lauren.
Don't want to jump in unless there's, and if there's any other questions, but seems like
Yeah.
we're good
Sorry,
to go.
Yeah, I was going to say, I will brief introduction. Claire and Helen have been working on the phosphorus calculator. We've talked briefly about the phosphorus calculator in the past. I've sent out a link for people to be able to download the interim phosphorus calculator, which is in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. And it was thought that it would be really helpful for people to see a demo, a live demo of the calculator in action. And so that's where Claire and Helen can come in. And so without any further ado, yes, and I will give you, if you have a desire to share your screen, I will give you those abilities.
Great. I think it would be helpful to be able to share screen. I have the option now, so I might be able to do it, but let me just test it out. Looks like it should work. Okay, so thanks, Dean. My name's Claire. I am the TMDL Tracking and Accounting Coordinator for the Clean Water Initiative Program with the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. And Helen is also here with me today from the Tracking and Accounting team at DEC. So as Dean said, I'm going to do a walkthrough demonstration of the interim phosphorus reduction calculator tool that we developed, the spreadsheet tool. I'll also do a demonstration of the stormwater treatment practice calculator tool, which is an online application tool that's been available for a couple of years now, but is the place to calculate estimated phosphorus reduction for all stormwater treatment practices. And then finally, I will demonstrate how to use the cost effectiveness calculator in the Excel tool to compare project level cost effectiveness between different projects. We should have time for questions at the end, but if you have something, a burning question that you'd like answered, feel free to chime in or put it in the chat. And yeah, maybe if somebody could just let me know if there's, you know, a hand raised or something that I'm not seeing. Okay, so I'll share my screen. The calculator, there we go. Can everyone see that? Should say applicant and recipient resources. So the interim phosphorus calculator tool, the Excel tool, is available for download here on our website. It sounds like you all have a link, but I will put one in the chat just in case that is useful. And okay, that's in the chat. Okay, so you can download the tool here. The Excel tool, when you open it up, looks like this. The spreadsheet tool has been developed to provide estimated annual phosphorus load reductions for several types of clean water projects. and is intended to be used by both project implementers as well as clean water service providers and basin water quality councils to inform project proposals and prioritization based on estimated phosphorus reduction potential and project level cost effectiveness. The directory tab is the first tab here when you open up the Excel sheet. This is a good place to start if you have a project in mind and you need to navigate to the correct section of the calculator tool for that specific project. So we have practice types with definitions describing what those practices are, and then a link to the appropriate calculator tool for each of those kind of groups of practices. Also on the directory page is a link to each of the standard operating procedures for tracking and accounting. This details the methods that DEC uses to calculate phosphorus reductions by project type. So if you'd like more information on kind of the behind the scenes of the calculator tool, it's all described in those SOPs, and those are links to our website where the SOPs are available. A few notes about, unfortunately, the tool does not have the capability to calculate phosphorus reduction for stacked practices, which means more than one practice that treats the same area. So just want to note that if you have multiple practices treating one area, adding the individual phosphorus calculation for each practice will overestimate the phosphorus reduction attributable to the project as a whole. So just important to keep in mind if you're looking at a project like that, kind of take the calculations with a little bit of a grain of salt. But for individual practices, kind of one practice, one project, the tool should provide an accurate estimation of the phosphorus reduction potential. Another thing to note is that the floodplain and stream section of this calculator tool will soon be replaced by the Functioning Floodplains Initiative online application, which is currently in the final stages of testing and development. This will be a web-based tool that has the functionality of estimating phosphorus reductions for floodplain and stream restoration projects. And it just provides a lot finer spatial scale than what we were able to build into the Excel version of the tool. So as soon as that web application is available, we will provide a link to that tool as the best place to go for floodplain and stream restoration project types for calculating phosphorus reduction. We'll also have trainings and provide some more information on how to use that when it's available, but just want to note that this is the option until that becomes available, and then will be switched out. And then finally, there are lots of values in the tool that are assumed values or kind of static values, and all of the formulas in order to make the tool usable. I was limited with the amount of kind of protections I could put on the tool. So if at any point any of those values or formulas accidentally get edited or deleted in the tool, you can always re-download a new version of the tool to make sure that you're working from kind of a fresh slate. Okay, so I'll run through an example of how to use the tool for a riparian buffer planting. So I will just click this link to go over to the riparian buffer tab of the tool. You can also just navigate between tabs based on the project kind of category that you're wanting to enter. When you're in the tool, it's best to move from left to right through the columns. All of the columns that have a green header are input columns that require a user input. And have a green header is a pre-calculated field that is an output. So it's important to enter a project ID in the first column. This allows for the tool to autofill the calculations, and we recommend that the project ID be the watershed projects database ID number if the project you're considering is already in the watershed projects database. If not, you can use any unique identifier that helps you keep track of what projects are what. So I will just make one up. Buffer example 1. All right, then you select the TMDL drainage area that the project is located in. I will select Missisquoi River. Enter the acres planted with riparian buffer planting. So this is the actual acreage of the planted area. I'll say it's a 2-acre buffer planting, and the buffer planting area was previously in a developed pervious land use. So say that it was a lawn, or kind of an unmaintained meadow but non-agricultural. I've included a land use definition for each of the 5 land use categories that are available for buffer plantings here, and to provide a little bit more detail. So just select the most representative one. And then also fill in the drainage area for the buffer. The drainage area is defined as 5 times the buffer planting area directly adjacent to the buffer planting area. And you can enter up to 3 land uses. So I will say that a portion of the drainage area was developed pervious as well. And maybe a smaller portion was developed impervious, a driveway, a road, something like that. And then maybe some of it was forest. So you enter the percent of the drainage area that's in each of these land use categories. You don't have to use 3 land use categories if the entire drainage area is covered by a single land use. You could just enter 1. Okay, great example. So this error check column, this has to add to 100%. So I have not entered my percentages correctly. I will just update this so that our total land use of the drainage area is 100%. The remaining columns are calculated. So this shows the total, the buffer's drainage area. Again, that's just 5 times the area of the planting. This shows the estimated phosphorus reduction resulting from treatment of overland flow in the drainage area. And this next column is estimated phosphorus reduction attributable to the land use change of moving from the buffer planting area from developed pervious land use to a forested land use. And this final column is the total estimated phosphorus reduction attributable to this project based on the details that we entered. So this would be the phosphorus reduction in kilograms per year for this buffer planting that was 2 acres and, had these land uses. So maybe I will just pause there for a brief minute to make sure there are no questions. I see one hand, Lauren.
Hey Claire, I was just curious about the 5 times the planted buffer area number, and just thinking about like if I'm planting in the landscape that it isn't like 5 times the buffer planting isn't receiving or isn't actually going to the buffer, should I make that smaller? I understand I probably can't make it bigger, but if it is actually smaller, does that matter?
That's a good question. For now, the way that our methods are set up, that's just an assumption, and it's in the SOP, the standard operating procedures for tracking and accounting. There's a little bit more detail on how we came to that assumption, but we recognize that it's not necessarily, at the project level representative, but for all of these the methods of estimating phosphorus reduction, it's a bit of a balance between, sort of the weight of data collection that we're asking of partners and the accuracy of the phosphorus reduction estimations. So I guess to answer your question more directly, that doesn't change. That's an assumed value. Yeah, it might be helpful to kind of note in, project details that, a visual assessment, you think that the drainage area is more like 3 times or something like that, but it doesn't need to be changed for the calculation. Hope that answers your question.
I can add just like a little bit more context. I think the reason that we did it that way was so that our partners on the ground kind of didn't have to do the GIS exercise of determining the slope and the actual area draining. So it is meant to make it kind of more simple, which is, you know, maybe less accurate on a project by project basis, but overall, as we average out all buffer plannings across the watershed, it evens out. So good question though.
Thank you.
Okay. If there are no
I do
other
see Alaire had her hand up also.
Oh, thanks.
Right. Just a quick question about the land use definitions. So would a hayfield is considered a pasture? I'm just confused about that, like hayfield with manure application, livestock grazing area.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a hayfield that doesn't have manure application and isn't used for grazing, does that still count as a hayfield, or would that be more like a developed pervious surface?
Yeah, that's a good question. Helen, do you have a thought?
Yeah, this is kind of asked before. I think it goes back to like, yeah, if it's like a meadow, I think we would put that, if it's non-agricultural, we would put it in the developed pervious land use. Kind of a weird name for it, I understand, but yeah, going back to kind of like the assumptions around the land use or the definitions around the land use that we used for the TMDL. I think that like a meadow or like a hay field that's not agricultural is more like just kind of a pervious general land use.
Okay. I mean, I guess I think of it as that it is agricultural, it just might not have manure.
Yeah.
Like if the hay is coming off of it, has a use. So just wondering about that.
Yeah, I think with the pasture, like with the pasture land use, we are assuming that there's, you know, there's livestock grazing there, so there's manure application. If it's a hay field where they are applying manure to it, maybe then you would call it like a pasture. But otherwise, I think I would call it developed pervious. It's kind of use your best judgment in some cases.
Okay. Thanks.
Great. Any other questions? All right, so I will demonstrate the stormwater treatment practice calculator, which is, it works largely the same as the Excel tool. It's just in a different format. You can navigate to the stormwater treatment practice calculator by clicking on this link. It is also available linked in the Clean Water portal on the DEC's website, whichever is easier to get to, and looks like this. All right, so for the stormwater treatment practice calculator, again, select the drainage area that the practice is in, and enter the impervious area that is draining to the practice. So not just the footprint of the practice itself, but the impervious area that's draining to the practice. So I'll say that's 1/2 acre, and maybe there's 1 acre of pervious area also draining to the practice. And then you select the type of practice that you'll be implementing. I'm going to select a rain garden with no under drain. You enter the storage volume of the practice. I'll say it's 1,000 cubic feet. I should mention that there's a little question mark with a help tip here for each field that's required in the stormwater treatment practice calculator. It provides some more information if you're unsure of what the field is asking for. So those are useful. And then also select the soil type. This is the infiltration rate that most closely matches the area without going over and is kind of representative of the predominant soil type. Once you've selected those and entered those specifications, click compute, and this section of the tool will show the phosphorus loading based on the drainage area that you entered. The capacity of the practice, this is how many inches of rainfall the practice can hold or treat, I guess. The efficiency is the removal efficiency, the phosphorus removal efficiency of the practice. And then you have your phosphorus reduction estimate here in kilograms per year. So this practice, based on what I've entered, would remove 0.69 kilograms per year of phosphorus. You can also enter a WPD ID number here, or another identifier, or kind of descriptive name in order to keep track of this. Once you have computed your phosphorus reduction, you can click to report. This will take you to a page where there's sort of summary information of what you've entered and what's been calculated. And this can be exported in various file formats and saved in your files, or kind of transferred to another tracking system if you have one. One thing to note is that the calculator tool can only calculate a phosphorus reduction for a single practice at a time. So if you had multiple different projects that you're looking at, just kind of go back and re-enter the new project specs and go through the process again. So like I said, similar in function, just a little bit different in format. There is some information, sorry, there's a link to instructions on how to use this tool if you need more information, and contact if you have any questions. So some resources there as well. Okay, I'll quickly just demonstrate the cost effectiveness calculation tool, which is in the Excel spreadsheet. This is for, this has been set up to calculate cost effectiveness based on the formula grant project prioritization cost effectiveness formula, which has not yet gone to public comment, so subject to revision, but will again be sure to notify users when a new version of the form is released, if that is to happen in the future. To use the cost effectiveness tool, you can pull the phosphorus reduction for any project that you've calculated phosphorus reduction in the Excel tool by just entering the same project ID as you entered in the tab, the calculator tab. So I'll do this for the riparian buffer. I use the project identifier buffer example 1. So in the cost effectiveness tab, I'll enter buffer example 1, and then select the project type. This is a forested riparian buffer. That fills in the design life of the project and also pulls in the estimated phosphorus load reduction that we already calculated for the buffer planting. Then it asks for total project cost, inclusive of both design and construction costs. And it also has an option to enter the total project costs inclusive and exclusive of any match or leveraged funds. So you can look at cost effectiveness of just formula grant dollars or cost effectiveness of the project as a whole. So for a buffer planting, say it costs $10,000 and $9,000 was covered under a formula grant. and the remainder was a match of some sort. So these final columns here show the estimated cost effectiveness for the total project cost and the formula grant cost portion of the project. And then if I were to want to compare that to the rain garden example we just went through, the rain garden, the only difference is that you need to manually enter the phosphorus reduction calculation for things that were calculated outside of the Excel tool. So that was 0.69 kilograms per year. Maybe the rain garden cost $4,000, and all of it was covered under formula grant. So there was no match or anything. So now filling out this table, you could start to build a comparison of different projects' cost effectiveness. And that's meant to be, just one tool to consider in terms of project prioritization and assessment of proposals. I will stop there, and I see the chat has some new chats, so I will, open up for questions.
Yeah, so Dean, I'll just ask if you can read the conversation you had with Beth and then with Tom as well, for the record.
Sure. If you were asking me to read what was the exchange, Beth had asked, who is going to be responsible for using this tool for proposed projects? Will this project proposer fill this out originally? And my answer to Beth quickly was that my take is that project proposers and QUISPs will use these tools. Ultimately, QUISPs are going to be responsible for providing DEC with the numbers that back up these calculations. The QUISP may be relying on the partners to provide it to us, but we will pass it up to DEC. I do think that as time goes by, the QUISPs, the partners will be interested in using this tool because as the focus turns to phosphorus reduction, they've only got a certain amount of capacity and time to put towards developing projects. They might want to think about which project is the best candidate for QUISP funding, so they may do some initial calculation on their own. I think these are just going to be another tool in the toolbox that partner organizations use as time goes by. And then Tom had asked, is there a list with typical costs for a given type of project? And yes, DEC does have a document that has a page in it with, I believe their average, maybe their median costs, but I think their average cost for different types of projects that are based on a database that they have. And it's something that, I'll make another editorial comment that it's going to be important information to keep updated because, as we know, costs have been kind of going haywire in the last year or so. Just one other thing while I can. I just wanted to put the numbers that are associated with the examples that Claire just showed in context. Some of them 1 or 2 pounds of phosphorus reduction per year. The reduction targets for the Missisquoi Rock Pike basins, the 1-year target is 145 kilograms. So we're talking about those were I was going to say singles and bunts, maybe just bunts, not doubles, not triples, not home runs in terms of phosphorus reduction. So the 5-year figure for the Missisquoi, upwards of 725 kilograms. So we have a lot of projects that we would need to move if we're gonna show progress towards those numbers.
Thank you, Dean. I was wondering, I noticed you kept choosing the Missisquoi River Basin, and I was wondering if you could look, is there a map or something we could get at what is the Missisquoi River versus the Missisquoi Bay? Because we're just gonna keep hitting that wall as this group at least. Cool, thank you.
Yeah, so how to explain this. I guess there's a slight difference in the way that the TMDL for Lake Champlain was set up, the watersheds for the TMDL versus tactical basin planning watersheds. So because everything is based on land use loading rates from the TMDL, we're going to ask you for the TMDL drainage area in this tool. How do you find that? That's a great question. There it is on the Natural Resource Atlas. So there's a layer on the atlas, and I need to pull it up to figure out which one it is. But there's the tactical basin planning layer, which I think you know what watershed that is. But there's also a layer that depicts the TMDL drainage areas. That I would have to remember what it's called. Lake segment?
This may be something we can just make sure gets distributed
Yeah.
in a future or follow-up email, but
Yeah,
that's an important distinction to have, and it would be great to have a map that shows the intersection of those two.
right.
I was just going to offer thanks for the feedback, and in the next version of the tool that gets released, I will include a link to find your TMDL drainage area so that that information is kind of embedded in the tool and not just some other map that got emailed around or something. So I've made a note to do that for when we release the next version of the tool.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming and demonstrating that. Really helpful. See you guys use it the right way. So thanks. And I'm assuming, I guess just in terms of timeline, the spring, it'll have the FFI maybe.
Oh, the FFI is, yeah. It's kind of on like a different track, different timeline. And we're relying on our consultants to kind of get that up and running. They did just send us a test, kind of internal test link. But the timeline on that is still a little fuzzy for me. Is that right, Claire? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to commit other folks to anything. We haven't heard a specific kind of launch date yet from them. So it sort of depends like how all of the testing goes and how much more revision is needed based on the testing, just to make sure things are working correctly before it gets released, so we don't have kind of misinformation out there. So yeah, unfortunately, we'll try and provide an update when we have a better picture of when that will be available. But like I said, we built in the stream and floodplain tab to the Excel version of the tool as sort of a really interim solution, so you can just get a ballpark idea of kind of what those projects might represent. And yeah, we'll make the FFI app available as soon as we can.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else have additional questions for our lovely guests? All right, seeing them. Thank you again for joining our WIC meeting and listening to the beginning portions of it while you were here, trying to sort out all the fun things.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. You're welcome. Appreciate being here.
Thanks. I'll put Helen and I's contact information in the chat. So if you have follow-up questions, feel free to reach out. We'll be happy to work through any questions or receive feedback as well. If you think there's updates that could improve the tool, we'll be kind of releasing updated versions of the tool as we need to. So we'll be happy to hear from you all as you start using it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks. It's me again. Sorry, everyone. I hope that was useful for folks. I had played around in the tool the other day, and I was like, hi, I'm lost already. It'd be great to know more about it. Thanks. I'm going to quickly, in the last little bit here, do a quick project presentation. A project you've probably heard me talk about before. That is one of the maybe potential projects we could bring forward for the QUISP funding. And if you have a project you want to present on next time, that would be great. All right. Can you see it full screen now? Yes, okay. So this is the Johnson's Mill Dam discussion. And so how I'll start this off is that in 2017, there was a study that said more than 1,100 dams have been removed in the US since 1970, and only 130 of them have any ecological or geomorphic assessments. So that's part one. I'll get back to that in a second. The Nature Conservancy is also working on scaling up dam removal in Vermont. They hired a coordinator for dam removals. The Vermont Dam Screening Tool shows that in the Lake Champlain Basin alone, there's more than 400 dams. They don't all necessarily need to be removed, but maybe there's some questions about them. In 2022, the Vermont Natural Resources Council also gave Franklin County District some funds to go scope the dams in Franklin County. So Franklin County, not Missisquoi Bay Basin fully. Fun distinction that makes it confusing. And there's many dams that are not on anyone's list. The Johnson's Mill Dam is in Bakersfield, Vermont. There it was. This is a pre-removal photo. So the dam isn't great here. It's where my mouse is, and the stream is flowing towards you downstream, meandering this way. And this is just a beautiful floodplain. The dam was owned by one person, and at his death, the land ended up being owned by his son and his daughter. And Franklin County Natural Resources Conservation District, before my time, reached out to several dam owners in the county to see if any were interested in removal. And this new son who owns the land was interested. He does not live around here, and he thought restoration was a great idea. This is post-removal. The dam used to be here, it's gone, which is very exciting. And we unearthed a bunch of natural bedrock on the sides of the main channel. The iron that you see in the water is something that we're still kind of chatting about with some river scientists and groundwater experts. No one thinks it's an issue, but it's certainly interesting. This is the channel this spring. So the dam was removed in August 2021. And this spring it had changed again. It's a very dynamic site, full of movement. So in terms of the project, timeline, kind of matching a QUISP project timeline. We did project development was done by Brody Hankey, if you knew him. I wasn't on board yet at the district. 2018 to 2019. The 30% design was done 2019 to 2020 by Stone Environmental. Fun thing happened at the Halloween storm of 2019. The dam actually breached on its own. So that was an interesting case study to just watch about half of the sediment flow downstream uncontrolled. In 2020 and 2021, there was final design and permitting, implementation in 2021. And then we have funds from the Lake Champlain Basin program for monitoring after removal for the next 4 years, which is kind of filling some portion of the gap that I mentioned on the first slide of no geomorphic or ecological assessments done on the dams. Here, we're trying to at least track the changes in the river post removal. We don't have a ton of information to match to pre-removal, but we have some stuff. So we will make some statements about before and after. I mentioned most of this work already, that it was a good candidate for removal because we expected to be able to restore aquatic organism passage for brook trout at this location if the dam was removed. We didn't think there was a natural waterfall, which sometimes can lead to less likelihood of funding if you know that you're not actually going to increase aquatic organism passage. Really quickly, lots of different funding sources. So many funding sources for various stages and many grants to juggle and claim as match and do the fun dance. In terms of numbers, one thing I will say in terms of when you're doing that phosphorus calculator, make sure you put in your own project management time, because this project took about $40,000 of project management from the district over that many years. The engineers took about $64,000 for all of the design rounds. There was a wetlands delineation that cost some pennies, historical review that cost $4,000. And then there was a bunch of permits. The contractor bids that came in were between about $90,000 and $160,000, so a really wide range. We selected Jeff Corey Excavating. That's a local group that I believe is also doing some work for Alaire elsewhere. Huge fans. It took them 7 days to take out the entire dam, restore the stream, and restore the site. It was very quick. And some things that we need to consider that maybe project manager wouldn't know to consider at first is where to bring that excavated sediment and concrete. Making sure you're tracking flow levels in the stream before and after and during construction, because they can rise rapidly and take all the sediment that's now exposed away. Thinking about when to plant and when to live stake things, and making sure the contractor we had really wanted us on site to make sure that they were doing the design right. And that was something that we hadn't necessarily accounted for, but led to a really great project. Monitoring for the next 4 field seasons. We are going to be monitoring the site. It is rapidly changing. It's a very interesting way. We have some edits to make on our CWIP with Lake Champlain Basin program, who is funding the monitoring. I don't know if you've ever written a CWIP. I will not be doing it again. And it's going to be really interesting. We're going to get some great vegetation information. We're going to fly a bunch of LiDAR flights, track sediment movement over time. And it's going to be neat. And there's going to be a public event next year, so stay tuned for that. And I really like this photo because it's just a good reminder that the roots are really holding everything together. I hope that was quick enough. I couldn't see a clock. Great. I will say, in terms of the dam scoping work that we just did this year to try to figure out if there are more dams in Franklin County to remove, there's 2 we're interested in that we're going to go visit with some regulators and see if they're interested in removing them too. And then we'll go talk to the landowners and see if they actually want them removed or not. So that's the game we're playing there. I don't have a phosphorus number for you, Tom. Luckily, that wasn't part of our prerequisite information. I don't know necessarily that a dam removal is actually a benefit to phosphorus load, but it is a benefit for river health. Whether or not that is being accounted for long term, we'll see. Ta-da! Any questions? Yeah, Dean.
Just to Tom's point, the folks who are working on this initiative statewide, I had put that question to them, There's no direct method that I am aware of, but you can calculate some phosphorus benefits depending on the specifics in terms of additional access to floodplain and things like that. And I don't know whether or not they're going to end up being significant given the cost, but there are some, at least that's what people who are doing some of this work are telling me, but they're just not directly related to the removal of the dam. They're related to what the removal of the dam allows. if that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah, the like restoration component. Yeah. Right. It's definitely, I think the funds for dam removals might maybe not be CWIP competitive, but there are a lot of aquatic organism passage and habitat funds, more and more coming online. It feels like every day to keep track of for dam removal type work. And we'll see if there's any dams to remove. It is 1 o'clock. Yes, Alaire.
Just really quickly, first I wanted to just say that it's really fun to just hear about a actual project, and I'm really excited about this group like moving into more of that where we're like talking about projects and like thinking about what the impact is. I know it's been a long time and will be maybe to get there, but that was great. So thank you. And I do, that we just did a dam removal, like you said, also working with Jeff in Colchester and removing the sediment that's built up behind the dam. I mean, there's a phosphorus component to that. So I'm really interested in thinking more about kind of what that can mean as well. Just having those like artificial impediments in the stream for so long and like building up phosphorus or building up sediment that contains phosphorus that otherwise would be, going into floodplains and sort of being established in a more productive way is really interesting. So
Yeah. If you want to get into dams, let me know. I would love to have more nerds on the team, and there's like a Vermont Dam Task Force and all this stuff if anybody else would like to do more dam things. I'm glad your project went well. I was following you on Instagram.
Oh yeah, totally. It's not in the Missisquoi Basin, but it's, I'm hoping we'll be able to do some of it there as well. So if anyone knows, landowners or especially folks who have land trust conserved land who have dams on their property, that's the kind of project we're looking for to do. So reach out.
Thanks. Any other comments, questions, or concerns? If not, we can hear a motion to adjourn. Is that right? Am I right? I didn't actually. Okay, I got a thumbs up. Questions? Okay, motion.
So moved.
Beth moves. Anyone second?
I'll second. Lindsay.
Thanks, Lindsay. Any abstaining? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. See. Beth, Tom, Lauren, Alaire, Barry, Sarah, Lindsay, Abe. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. If you are sticking around for the public participation committee meeting in 13 minutes, just stay logged on. Feel free to mute and turn your video off. Is it a different link?
Yes.
Ooh,
Yes.
It's a totally different link. Ignore me. Click a different link. Thanks, everybody.